Coach K, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me as always.
Man, it's so great. I'm so excited about this season. I mean, I think you guys, your program is always a program that everybody follows. It draws so much attention. It's so good. But let's start talking about last year.
Yep.
How incredible was it last season, huh?
Yeah, it was a fun season, absolutely.
I mean, on my highlight, I'd have to say, it was definitely that Ridgefield comeback.
Yeah.
I've been with a lot of sporting events doing this, but that was one of the most exciting things I've experienced.
Yeah, that was a special game, and I remember we talked afterwards, and you'd ask me a question. I'm like, to be honest, I don't even know. I kind of blacked out in the moment, and that result and the way that game went is just so unique and so rare to happen.
What I experienced, I remember feeling that is that I never felt that you were out of that game. And following your program and just the resilience that your boys have and the way you guys coach, it's just this never give up attitude. And that's, I think, what stuck with me so much from that game. Talk about that and how this program has just built that winning mentality over these years.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of holding to a really high standard. I think, it's something that when 2019 when I took over, we started to instill as the coaches, and I think right from that first year, it was something that the players bought into. And as a coach, there's so much you can push, but it really comes from that peer leadership and that player leadership in our program. And those classes that came before kind of started that, and the last handful of classes have really pushed it to a new level. And I think this year's seniors are doing the same thing, where they've taken ownership of their program, and we talk about it that hopefully I'm going to do this for a long, long time, and they get one shot to be seniors and to do, have this season as their team. And I think they've really taken great ownership in that, and take a lot of pride in that.
So I talked about my favorite moment. What was your favorite moment last season?
It has to be winning the championship, right? Winning the state championship. Yeah. That's the goal we talk about at the start of every year, is to compete for championships and to hopefully wind up winning one, or, really the goal is to win both. It hasn't been done yet. So, hopefully that's in the near future. But yeah, to win that championship, to finish your last game, to really more than anything, it's when that game ends, to have that excitement and that happiness and that joy, and it changes your perspective really on the whole season, because you're walking away from it with such happiness and such excitement, right? And, in 2024, that year, we didn't win the state championship, and, the hurt and the sadness and, the season's over and guys are crying and the coaches are all upset and the players are upset, right? Like that feeling just, is the worst. And, on the other hand, winning that championship, you just ride off into the summer on the best feeling and the best ending as possible to the season. It's
bittersweet because in 24, we had that epic FCAC game.
Yep.
I mean, that's, again, Adam clearing that goal and everybody jumping it. It was, but still, like you said, almost like the taste that stays in your mouth is like that last game, right?
Absolutely.
So the FCAC states, and you said it hasn't been done yet, but what are you planning to do this year to kind of break that streak?
Yeah, I mean, listen, every year we're learning, we're getting better as a coaching staff, how we do things, right? And coming off of that, season where we did win the FCACs and didn't win states, just seeing how hard it was to kind of, turn it back on a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. And talking with Coach Goldshore off their basketball season, right? They're going through the same kind of thing where you're competing for an FCAC championship into the state championship. And it's kind of hard to, I think our program, has a little bit of a chip on its shoulder, a little bit of an edge, right? Probably everybody, right? Going through the season, heading into your first round of playoffs, the FCACs, you have this edge and this chip on your shoulder. And then all of a sudden you get this kind of release of, we just won the championship. And that year was the first one ever in our program's history. And that was such an accomplishment that it's kind of hard to then turn it back on. Like, we've just accomplished this amazing thing. Yeah. How do you now go get kind of angry again and frustrated again and pissed off again to then go into the state playoffs and play with the same way you played when, I remember that year everybody was saying it was a revenge tour, right? Teams had beaten us through the season. So it's, okay, we're walking into this playoffs of, we're trying to beat teams that beat us. And now you're going to the states, naturally feeling a little bit good about yourself as players, as coaches, right?
You would, yeah.
And how do you turn that back on? That was one of the hardest things. But coming off of that season, hopefully we're in that opportunity where we're competing and winning an FCAC championship. And then we have a plan ready for, if that happens, to, how do we turn that thing back on to make sure we're in the right mindset heading into the States.
We've had some memorable interviews. I think probably one thing that sticks with me, and I'll bring it up for as long as we talk, was the Darien game where you said we had to be tougher, and you weren't talking about tough physically, but tough mentally.
Yeah.
That stuck with me because I think it kind of changed me a little bit when you said, you need to make the decisions when they're not easy to be made. And talk about a little bit, and everybody, you talk about successful programs, and you guys obviously one that so successful over the years. But how do you install that, that mentality, that winning? Because you're talking about, how you turn all that. What is that like? Because I think that, and I'm not saying that everything turned around from that game, but I think when you said that game kind of struck a chord, because, I get sometimes people talk to me, not so much you guys, I'm more accessible. Yeah. But that was a memorable thing you said. But talk about what is that like, and how do you do it, and what were you, if you can relive that a little bit, and how do you put that into a program? How do you make kids do that?
Yeah, I think, that mindset for us of being tough, and what is being tough. There's a lot of players, a lot of programs, right, that talk a lot, right? And it's easy to talk, and it's a matter of how do you back that up with your actions, right? And so mental toughness absolutely is a focus for us. We schedule the hardest schedule we can possibly create, trying to play the best of the best, nationally ranked teams that prepare us for those moments that we see. We played Brunswick last year, lost 6-5 in that game. We played St. Anthony's and lost 10-8 in that game. So those are 2 top 5, top 10 teams in the country that we hung with, and I think at Brunswick, we were kind of in a position to potentially win the game. St. Anthony's was kind of leading us. It was a tight game the whole way through. But, you look at those 2 games and the way it prepares you, right? And the way we practice, trying to go through as many situations as possible, right? And we talk about it a lot of times, right? In the sport of lacrosse, there's a loose ground ball, and every kid from the time they're kindergarten is told ground balls win the game, right? And so it's such a big focus is to get the ground ball, right? And one of the most common penalties that happen in lacrosse is a push in the back, and they happen around loose ground balls, right? Because you're going in there and everything you've been taught is like, this ball matters. I've got to go get it for my team. And there's a guy on the other team in front of you. And a lot of guys will feel like, well, it's tough because I knocked the guy over. I was really aggressive. I was really physical. But like, a piece of the mental toughness is to actually go in there and do the right thing so that you don't get a penalty, but you have a chance to actually get the ball, right? And so it's like scenarios like that, situations like that we talk about, where toughness is not just like brute strength, right? But it's also being able to make the right decision, where we feel like, and I feel like, right, like the easy out is to just shove the guy in the back because I can go pick the ball up. But the ref's going to call that against you. So it's actually not a tough play, even though it looks physically tough. It's not tough because you took what we would say is the easy way out instead of the tough way, the hard way to go get that ball.
That's incredible, right? And it's a mentality. It's the little things. I always find the difference between programs that do really well. It's kind of the little things they do. And I want to touch best. So you talked about schedule. I mean, I looked at the schedule. It is packed in the front. And I know that you guys never like to talk about things, but I have it circled on mine, that game with Fairfield Prep that's coming up early in the season. Isn't there a game with Fairfield Prep?
No, we don't play Prep this year, no.
So I'm mistaken. Really? I thought
we play St. Anthony's early.
And then who's the second and third? I thought I had Prep on my schedule. No. It wasn't there a Prep school in the beginning of the schedule?
There's a few private schools. St. John's Prep is one of the early ones.
It might be St. John's Prep.
Probably.
St. John's Prep. Yeah. So my mistake, everyone. I apologize for that. Okay. I thought I saw Prep, like, what is this? So there might have been something else I looked at. But so you packed the schedule in the beginning. And like you said, and it's going to be tough before. And then the FCAC is tough. I mean, aside from 15, it's going to be tough too as well. But, and I went through this with some of the basketball, you kind of try to prepare you in the beginning. But, even like if you lose those few free games, and I don't think you will, but let's just say something happens, but you still keep that program going. What is that beginning like, and why do you do that in the beginning like that? Yeah,
well, to be honest, we try and schedule as hard as we can all season long, right? And the early season winds up being when we can get our out of conference opponents in, right? And so as you mentioned, the FCAC, it's one of the best lacrosse leagues, best lacrosse conferences in the country at the public school level. I think it's the best. I don't really think there's another one that's even that close public school wise. And then when you talk private schools, like I put it up there with the best of the best. So when you look at the tier 1 of the FCAC, you have, teams that are in the national rankings every single year. And then on top of that, again, we're trying to find the toughest schedule we can build. In early season, you want to learn a lot about yourself, right? And to your point, your point there of, whether you win or you lose those games, right? We look at it of, we're going to learn a lot about ourselves, right? And so on our championship runs in past years, there's been those games against the best out of conference opponents that have, exposed who we are and the things that good teams in the playoffs are going to expose if we don't change, if we don't make adjustments, right? And so, you talk about our out-of-conference schedule. Right, I mentioned St. Anthony's and Brunswick, which are in the top 5, top 10 every single year. We play St. John's Prep, right, is the Massachusetts state champ, I think, 4 or 5 years in a row. We play this year, we've added LaSalle from Rhode Island. They're the Rhode Island state champ, I think, the last 3, maybe more years. We play Bishop Girton from New Hampshire. They're the 4-time defending or 5-time defending state champ in New Hampshire, right? And so for us, it's, obviously we want to schedule the best teams we can get, but also teams that are championship programs, right? And to play teams that are fighting for championship. St. Anthony's and Chaminade are fighting for the Catholic League championship every year. So to play teams like that are championship caliber programs and are battle tested themselves with their schedule, you're going to get a great opportunity. Win, it really pumps you in the rankings and pushes you higher and higher. And loss, you get exposed that really great coaches and really great players show you where some of your liabilities are and some of your areas of strength that you can lean into and what you got to clean up.
And, I think a lot of those are home this year, right? You have quite a beginning. And I think like last year, I think you traveled at the beginning of those and this year they're coming home. Yep. So that would be good we get to kind of see those games close. It's always fun. But let's talk about this year team. There's obviously, I think like from, lately, I think both football, basketball, and you guys in baseball have been doing such a great job of kind of that farm system, what I call the PAL and all that. And obviously you have all the clubs and things like that. And you keep it seems like you always have talent coming up. So how is this year's team?
Yeah, I'm very excited about this year's team. I feel like, when I wanted to interview and interviewed for the job here and took the job here, this was the kind of team that I wanted to coach, right? And I think what I mean by that is it's a team that I feel like there's a lot of players who felt like they've been overlooked, right? And a lot of players who feel like they've been waiting their time, right? And we absolutely graduated a handful of superstar players last year, a ton of guys that were very valuable to us as, I don't want to call them depth pieces, but impact players across the field, maybe not all Americans, but guys that filled big roles for us. And I think looking at this year, there's some guys that returned that were starters that, in the preseason and the scrimmages we've had have looked exceptional. And then there's a lot of guys that, people didn't see on the field for us last year that have been waiting their term. And like I said, it's a group that I think is really hungry, that feels like they've been a little bit overlooked. I think the chatter around Connecticut, it probably is like, this is the year that you can go get Staples and, and take us down. And, we might have had a couple wins over the last year, but this is the year that we're a down team. So again, like I said, this is the kind of team that I wanted to come to Staples to coach, because I feel like this is where the program was, in a team where it's like, okay, there's talent and, but there's a lot of Division III guys, and it's not, it's guys that are superstars. It's a team that's kind of been, the 25 class was so good with Josh and Adam and Tristan and Cam and Dave and like all these guys. And it's like these current seniors, they've been waiting their time. And I feel like they feel that little chip on their shoulder the same way I've always kind of had a chip on my shoulder. And I think this is like the kind of team that I wanted to coach with that kind of energy, that underdog mindset has always been a strength for us. And you look at the rankings, and it shows that there's, what I feel like, and I think we feel like, is a little bit of disrespect of who we are as a program based on the results we've had. But, I think for our senior class, it's nothing new for those guys. I think they relish that. I think they're hungry to prove that wrong. And I think that's me and our coaching staff. We feel the same way.
Rankings, it only matters the that last week's ranking. That's the only one that matters, right? It's like, because everything else is subjective, because nobody's playing everybody else. And I feel like, you get to the playoffs, the AFSAC tournament is so great, state tournament is so great. And it's about finishing that at the end, right? Because it's votes and all that. But the team, like you said, and it's always about defending, right? Can you defend? Can you score enough? Talk about those two aspects of the team this year, and where do you think is going to be your strong suit? What's the team going to be like on the field when we look at that first week?
Yeah, I think overall we're going to be very fast, very athletic, very aggressive team, and which is a little bit different than what we've been the last couple of years. In the sense of, I think we're going to play a little bit faster paced games. I think we're going to be a little bit more run and gun, and I think we're going to be more aggressive in transition. I think starting at the back end for us, I think our defense, our goalie play, I think I'm expecting to have, strong play on that end, right? I know we're replacing, All-American, the state player of the year, but, between Nate Hammond, who's a junior, and Grant Thiesinger, who's a sophomore, those two guys are fighting for the starting job. Both of them played great. I thought on Saturday we had a jamboree day where we had a couple scrimmage opportunities, and I thought both of them played great. And so I'm expecting great goalie play from either/both of those guys. And then on the defensive end, I think between Bear Swearingen, who's a captain for us, and Nate Marilla, who's acting like a captain for us as a junior. Those two guys, I think, will lead our group. I think Rory Benton has done a really nice job. He's one of those seniors that I feel like has got a chip on his shoulder, and he's shown up for the preseason. And then we've got three juniors behind those guys that are all fighting to get on the field. So the defensive end, I think we're strong. Obviously, Max Hill, is a defensive midfielder for us. Last year was an All-American as a sophomore, which is pretty unique and pretty rare. And he deserved it. He absolutely deserved it. So, with him, a guy like Finn Edwards, who's a sophomore for us, Sam DiGiovanni, another one of those seniors that I think, the Staples students recognize, but I think, people around the state probably don't know who he is. I think he's set to have a really good season for us. So I think at the defensive end, I think we're going to be strong there. Again, with those leadership, especially from Bear and from Nate, those two guys, and then, Max Hill's cover ability. And then I think those guys all can handle the ball and push transition. I think that's why we'll be able to be even more aggressive than we were in the past. And then looking at our offense, I think between Hunter Pillai, junior attackman going to Bucknell, and Charlie Clark, senior attackman and captain for us, headed to Vermont. Those two guys have looked incredible in the preseason. Lightning quick, we're saying quick twitch, shake and bake, change of direction Dodgers. They do a great job looking for each other, feeding each other to get assists to each other. Those two guys have been great. And then I think, Tristan Benton is another one of those, again, him and his twin brother on opposite ends of the field. But I think both of those guys have a chip on their shoulder. I think they're ready to go. And Tristan was coming back from a small injury and played on Saturday and, kind of looked like the missing piece for our offense to really get the ball moving and flowing. And then I think we've got some dangerous midfielders, between Nick Weil and Ian Frankel and Connor Petrosino. And we've got two freshmen that are pushing for playing time in the midfield for us this year. So really looking forward to a high energy, fast paced, definitely a more aggressive play style this year with those guys.
Yeah, it's incredible. Like you talk about freshmen and sophomores and kids who are like at such a young age too, contributing so much at that level, right? Because it's certainly special, and it sets you up greatly for the rest of the season, right? I mean, for years to come.
Yeah.
I think of all like and I still feel like there's a lot of people get lacrosse, but a lot of people don't, right? But I still think like it's one of the sports, at least for me, that there's like, so we're never really over because, the goals can happen so fast and it's so exciting. But, there's been talk about the shot clock. Mm-hmm. Are you in favor or against that?
For me, I absolutely would be in favor of it, right? I think a big chunk of that is because that's what's played at the college level, right? And part of my job and a big part of my job, there's winning matters. But a lot of it is preparing our guys to go to the next level and be successful. And with college playing a shot clock, I think for us, it's, it makes sense that we're preparing these guys to play at the next level. We should be playing at least similar rules and really, I think, the same rules. And then as far as play style, right? The prep school, so a place like Brunswick, when we played at Brunswick last year, we played with the shot clock. They follow the college rules exactly the same. So we played with a shot clock there. That was I felt like the most exciting, fast pace, up and down, play after play after play. And the score was 6-5, right? It wasn't even like it was a 15-14 game, right? And that's one of the things about the shot clock. Well, more goals, and it changes the game. And, but in all honesty, like it was a low scoring game, but it was just packed with action, right? Great saves, great clears, great takeaways, great opportunities to score that some reason didn't go in. It was just it felt like, and I think everybody who watched the game, everybody on our sideline, you really felt like that was a different style of play. That's just way more energetic, way more exciting. So absolutely, I'd be in favor of it.
Yeah, and that's interesting because you talk about the next level, right? And your program has been historic for placing so many kids at the next level of lacrosse, right? Be it Division I, you had Adam and Josh obviously going, I think Michigan and North Carolina, and you every year you have players going everywhere, Division II, Division III. What do you think is about the Staples program that sets the players up so nicely for the next level? And listen, we see a lot of, especially sorry to interrupt you, but it's like, your channel's like, I think the other day you had Neelan and Udell and somebody, I forget
Henry Dodge,
Henry Dodge, right? Yep. I mean, these guys, what do you think is about the program that sets it up so nicely?
Yeah, I think if you're a young lacrosse player in the town of Westport, right now, this year is the year to watch college lacrosse and to dream about being there yourself, right? Because we've got, you just mentioned a handful, but we've got, over 20 guys playing in the college level, and we've got guys that are on the field impacting their college teams, right? Henry Dodge is up there as arguably the best face-off guy in the country, right? He's up there number 1 or number 2 with the kid at North Carolina. Henry's exceptional. We've got Adam Udell starting as a freshman. We've got, Josh Marcus starting as a freshman. We've got Gavin Rothenberg and Will Heisler starting at Colby. And Will's been a 4-year starter for them in goal, right? So we have tons and tons of guys at the next level, and I think you're right. Like this is, for me, this is the year for us to, we've got so many guys that are not only on the college teams, but are impacting on their college teams. What is the cause of that? I think a chunk of it goes to our coaching staff. I think, and when I say that, I mean the number of coaches we have across our program. So our freshman team has 3 coaches. Our JV team has 2, plus a goalie coach that kind of bounces around. And then our varsity team has 6 coaches, right? So when you consider that we've got roughly 100 players in the program and we've got 12 coaches, every player in our program should be, and I believe they do, receive really good instruction and consistent instruction on a daily basis, right? And that was one of the things that from day one, we talked about was we want to make sure every player in our program gets a little bit better every day, right? And so, if you came to a practice, you would see there's not a ton of standing around. There's coaching going on all over the field. They're split up into groups. So from that regard, I think there's great instruction. And I think I've got the best coaching staff in the state. And those guys, a lot of them have been with me for a while. A lot of them have played at the highest levels and know what it takes to play at the highest level. I think the next piece of it is kind of the discipline and like holding to high standards. We've discussed it in the past. Like we're tough on our guys, right? We expect a lot out of them. We, try to push them to be the best they can absolutely be. And, if guys are making the right play, they know about it and we're pumping them up and telling them that's the kind of play. And if they're making the wrong play or they're making the wrong decision, they know about it, right? And so I think it's, sometimes it's when there's not quite that level of discipline where you kind of let something go one time and then the next game it goes again and the next game it's 2 times and 3 and then all of a sudden it changes where these guys are being held to a high standard. So I think, those things and then the overall competition level, right? On a daily basis, you look at our practice, we've got guys who are, in college. We've got guys now who are committed to go to college. We've got underclassmen that are starting for us, playing for us on varsity. Like those guys are going to be, I think, high-end college lacrosse players. When you're showing up to practice every day and that's who you're competing against, you're naturally getting better. And our best attackman going against our best defenseman, those 2 guys are pushing each other on a daily basis, right? And then our goalie is seeing shots from these great shooters. And then our shooters are trying to score on these great goalies. I think, those components kind of all come together to set our guys up for success at the next level.
It's interesting you mentioned that because what I've heard, and this was kind of maybe before I started doing PrepZone about 3 years ago, is that it's hard to coach at the high school level because when the players get there, a lot of them are already formed, which means they've been through clubs, right? They've been specialized and all that.
Yep.
But you just mentioned something that getting the coach. So is that something you've seen? And if you have or you haven't, how do you coach differently a player that maybe when you get, you're like, well, this guy already knows what's going on. And how do you do that?
Yeah. So I think, one of the advantages we have and maybe another added component to what we were just talking about is why is there success at the next level is our high school coaches are super invested into our youth program, right? And so, when you say players are entering the high school and they're kind of already formed, the good news is like
you formed them.
There have been a lot of high school coaches helping to push them along their path, right? And show them the right way. And, I coached myself and Coach Pat Sequeira, who was a 2020 captain for us, played at Bucknell, now is back coaching with us. Pat and I coached the 8th grade team together, right? With a couple other guys that coach. Coach Anderson, Steve Anderson, who's been my right-hand man from the beginning, has helped me build everything we've built. He's been equally as important as I have to building it. He coaches our 7th grade team, right? We've got Danny Petersorek, who's our freshman coach. He coaches in the youth. So Coach Griffin, who's our JV head coach, he coaches in the youth program. So yes, they're coming to, kids are coming into high school and they've had some development along the way. I think a lot of that or a good chunk of that is coming through our program because of our coaches that are willing to put in the time and the energy and the extra. Our practice ends at 6:00 and they're going right out to a youth field to coach till 7:30, which helps those guys come into the high school as prepared as possible.
Yeah, and that might be the difference, right? Because I don't know if that has always been the case. It's like it's been. I think lately has been a great, synergy between those programs. And that I guess that's what the success is like.
Yeah,
we're seeing it.
Yeah, it's funny because we back in the fall I was kind of doing the math and talking to some of the players, and you're like, the freshman class when I got here, they were like 2nd graders at that point, right? Something like that's 1st or 2nd graders, and you're like, okay, these guys have come through a program that has been our program, right? And part of that it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, right? And seeing all the success recently and trying to make sure that they don't think, okay, well I just enter the high school and I get the block S and now we're a championship team. I'm a champion because of what has been built before me, right? It's a matter of where did this program come from to get to where we are, and making sure that we don't just feel like, okay, again, I walk in the door and I'm good to go. It's the hard work on a daily basis from the day that, school starts as a freshman, that hard work and consistency and discipline. How does that build on itself so that come the end of the season, you're fighting for a championship?
For me, when I took my parent cap off and put the PrepZone cap on, I realized that, the players who get the playing time, who are on the field, are the ones that are putting in the work.
Yep.
Is the guys who are, like I said, staying after practice, who are doing all the work, your captains. There's no shortcuts to get playing time.
Absolutely, and not only to get the playing time, but also to get the success, right? And so, a guy I didn't mention when we were talking about kind of the roster is one of our captains, Eric Skolnick, right? And it's face-off position, which, if you're a Staples Lacrosse fan, you know how important the face-off position has been to us. And Eric did a great job last year, and this year as a senior, we anticipate he's going to be one of the best guys in the state, if not the best in the state. And that comes from that off the field work, right? And I think he is a really good example of that to our whole program, right? Guys see him putting in the extra work and the extra time, and that stuff is contagious, right? And I think again, our whole senior class and the leadership there has done a really nice job of that, of the extra work outside of practice.
And Eric is a guy that I see around a lot. He goes to a lot of other games. Like, he's very present. You can see that he's really about that school spirit and showing that up. So, not that the other ones are. Eric's a big guy. You can see him from anywhere, right?
Yeah, he doesn't look like a face-off guy.
No, he doesn't. He's a really big guy and all that. So I really enjoy that. How's the family? How's everybody doing?
Everybody's good.
How old are your kids now?
Yeah, so I have 2 boys. Trip is actually turning 5 in like a week, a little over a week. And then my other son, Grady, turned 2 back in December. So basically 5 and 2.
5 and 2. So yes, they're still a couple years away, a few years away from playing Staples Lacrosse.
Staples, yes. Yeah,
Staples Lacrosse,
So Trip's finally, or shouldn't say finally, but Trip's gotten into it, which has been a ton of fun. Last spring was really the first season where he was asking me to come hang out in the locker room and wanted to be on the field after the games and wanted to get high fives from the players and that kind of stuff, which, I told at our banquet at the end of the year last year how much that meant to me, that to see my son starting to fall in love with the sport that I love so much and means so much to me. And, my full-time career is lacrosse coaching in a variety of capacities. And to see my son start to fall in love with that sport, my dad was my first coach. He played college lacrosse, helped me fall in love with the sport. And now to see that in my son meant so much to me last year. And those guys, that senior class and the whole program last year really took care of him so well. And I'd be like, all right, come in the locker room, hang out with the guys. I'd go in the office for a couple of minutes and just listening to make sure he was okay. But those guys took care of him so well. And now he's, we put him into a couple clinics in the off season this fall and this winter, and he started to pick up his stick and wants to go to the field with me. So that part of it has been really exciting to see him start to really have a little bit of a passion. And again, he's 5, about to be 5, doesn't know what he wants to do long term or anything like that. But, asking me to go to the field with him on the weekends is pretty fun.
It is. Like I'll say, because I also had 2 boys. So I remember when my older one, because I play a pickup game. So the minute that he kind of, stopped playing high school, I said, so now you can come to Dad's pickup game. So but playing with him, he was 18 and it was amazing playing soccer with him. And then the other one, same thing when he played volleyball. So we played a volleyball tournament together, like a grass volleyball tournament.
Cool.
It's there's nothing like it. I mean, you think about it, but there's nothing like it because you're playing with your kid and it's it is the best time of your life. So I can totally relate. And I know that they're so young when they get there a bit older, when you can kind of give some shots to them, you can enjoy that a lot. It'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, a ton of fun. We went up, so this past weekend actually was his first, he's pre-K, but I'm throwing him into the kindergarten practices. Yeah. We live in New Canaan, so he's wearing all his navy blue gear. I made sure he looked right going to the New Canaan practices, which a couple guys made comments to me, but a couple of the New Canaan high school players were there helping out, coaching up the little guys, which was awesome. So we went out, that was on Sunday morning. So I'm like, all right, let's get up to the field. He's got to wear a helmet and elbow pads, shoulder pads, the whole setup. And I'm like, just a little nervous that maybe he would be uncomfortable and complain the elbow pads are itching me and I don't want to do it. So we went up and practiced around on Saturday and had a blast. And it was just the coolest thing. The 2 of us were up there. He was telling me to come check him and try and take the ball away. And then he was shooting on the net. And then there was a 6th grade game going on. And he was like, all right, can we just watch the game now? And we sat down on the sideline and he was sitting in my arms, sitting next to me. I'm holding him up and watching the game. And he's asking me questions about the game and who's that and what are they doing? And it was a really, special, surreal experience to see that and to see again, like my passion that he's starting to get interested in it. And, choked me up a little bit sitting there holding him, watching the game like that.
Yeah, I think the only time I cried in the field was a game for both. I cried, I think, was like at a travel soccer game. And, when they made it the FCX final, I cried with my volleyball son. So it's like, because you can try to explain to people what it's like seeing your son play a sport, but until you actually see it, and getting, I can only imagine these guys, like look at, Archie Manning, who's got, players who play like super volley. It's like, I that level, it's pretty cool. But I don't think it really matters. It's about the person, not really the game.
Yeah.
It's about the person.
No, I'm excited for that.
Yeah, it's going to be great. And how's Steel Point going? I know we talked last year. I've seen a ton of stuff. You guys are just growing leaps and bounds. How's that going?
Yeah, Steel Point's been greght. So Steel Point Athletics, we're indoor facility, training area, or training space up in Bridgeport, kind of right by Bass Pro Shops, right off 95. So that's been good. Coach Anderson and I have been involved with that and managing that. So
the flag football league's been pretty cool. I followed some of that stuff as you guys got into. That's great, right?
Yeah. So there's a lot going on. We've got baseball, we've got flag football, boys and girls. We've got boys and girls lacrosse. There's some high school athletes that train with us, college athletes that are in there, in their breaks, and then tons of individual skill development, right? And that's really for myself, for Coach Anderson, Coach Ralphie is is our baseball coach, right? Like we've always had such an emphasis on that skill development and that individual development. So we've spent a lot of time focusing in on that in those settings, and then combining it with the having a ton of fun, making sports exciting and fun again, right? Like building in a development component and then building in a gameplay component, right? And we did a sixes tournament, which is basically a speed version of lacrosse. So smaller field, everybody's a short stick. The goal is scored. The goalie picks it up, passes to somebody, and you just go. So it's like kind of closer to basketball, where it's like constant movement. There's we didn't play with a shot clock, but there's a 30-second shot clock, so it's very fast. We did that, kind of as the end of the winter, the start of the spring season, which was a total hit. We had a blast doing it. A bunch of the Staples High School guys came and helped coach the teams. They were, yelling and screaming and high-fiving the little guys. So it was really cool to see that day. But yeah, it's a matter of like, how can we instruct and coach and develop young lacrosse players, young athletes, and again, like I said, other sports as well. And then how do we make it a ton of fun, right? Because I think that's a piece that's lost a lot of the times.
It needs to be fun.
In the youth sports now it's how am I getting to the next level? How am I getting to the next level? And kids are, I think parents are thinking about their fifth grader of, okay, well someday I want him to go here. So I've just got to train them to get to that point. And so much of it comes from being athletic and being a multi-sport athlete and participating in a lot of things and then not burning out because it's a job, but doing it because it's fun and enjoyable. So we've tried to manage, marrying both of those things together where you're getting the development, but you're also having a blast doing it.
Yeah, it has to be fun. I mean, I think that's the only thing people stick with anything, right? It has to be fun, it has to be like something that adds so much to it. And you mentioned high school kids, going to these games. It's like, experience from rec soccer is like, I remember when I was, my older one was just in rec and I was coaching rec soccer and I wasn't involved. And then Wilg had the high school players come and hang out with the rec kids, right? And we took pictures and they hang out the whole game. And I remember I still talk to my son. He's like, that was probably like the most fun day I ever had at soccer.
That's cool.
Because, the high school kids came in and they coached, they went through warm-ups. And I know you guys do that so much, but I don't know if the high school kids get how important that is.
Yeah, I don't know. To be honest, I don't know. I think once in a while it hits them, but I would say for the most part, you're right. Like so where we practice up at Wakeman, right, our turf practice field up there, so many times during the spring, there'll be, the fourth graders are coming and they're going to be at the grass field kind of next to us. And we finish practice. I'm like, all right, I need you 10 guys to just go walk over to that field, go around to every huddle of kids as they're doing drills, get over there for 10 minutes and just give them high fives and show them what it's all about, right? And make them excited about what they're doing and, just show face over there a little bit, right? And our guys do such a great job of that. There's, tons of camps and clinics and things that our high school coaching staff is doing throughout the year, and our high school guys are always ready to jump at those opportunities to impact the young guys. So I think our guys have a grasp of it, but definitely not to the degree where, right, you're saying your son is like looking back on it, like that was one of my most fun days I ever played, right? And I don't know that our guys are recognizing that in the moment, but I think that they'll have perspective at some point to kind of look back and be like, man, I was impacted by somebody else, and then I got to return that favor. And from my coaching experience, I know how valuable that is, right? I was talking about my son's kindergarten practice. They had three of the 5 captains were there helping coach. And at the end, I was like, to my son Trip, like, let's go, we're going over there to take a picture, because someday, like, you're going to want to look back on that picture, and it's going to be cool to see how these guys were seniors in high school and you were in kindergarten. They're kind of finishing their lacrosse journey in New Canaan and you're starting it. And then someday you're going to be that hopefully be that, that senior player that's there in whatever sport it is. Maybe it's lacrosse, maybe it's something else, but you're going to be that guy that's there, that's impacting then the next generation. And we'll look at that picture of you in kindergarten and that picture of you as a senior and just laugh at how much has changed in that time.
Yeah, and how blessed we all are to live those periods and be able to have those opportunities, right? For both. I think for the kids who are doing it, because you have these people who look up to you, whatever it is, and then for the kids who experience that, you have kids around you that really care, that come up and do that, and that's amazing. So, all right, we're sitting, we're having that interview. What's the season? What are you going to figure like? And we always ask this: what's successful season this year for Staples Boys Lacrosse 2026? 2 championships.
Listen, that's the goal. Absolutely, that's the goal. I wouldn't be fair to you if I told you anything different. That's what we talk about inside our program every year. We want to compete for championships. We want to try and win FCX. We want to try and win states, understanding those are 2 really difficult championships to win, but that's what our goal is, definitely. Do you wind up not accomplishing that goal, and does that ruin the season? No, it doesn't, right? And you can still have successes along the way, and wind up, being better at the end of the year than we were at the beginning, and being a closer knit team, and each kid developing along their path. So it's not like you don't win a championship and it's a total bust and a failure of a season. That's not the case, but we expressly will say within our program that that's our number one goal, is to go win championships at the end of the year.
And this is your 8th year? Or
I forget. So 2019 was my first season, and then we have 2020, which was canceled that spring. So whatever, 19, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. So this will be my seventh season, but 8 years as the head coach.
Yeah, because I was counting, you said the guys were in second grade are now freshmen. That's how I did that math right there real quick. Yeah. But let's end with this. What has been, I guess, the most surprising thing for you as you took over this? You took over a program that that was good, but it wasn't at the level that you've taken it to. What has been the most surprising thing? I guess work with high school kids around town and things like that. You can say, this maybe taught me the most. This was the thing I didn't expect to have, and maybe that you can share a little bit on this time as you were back on it.
One of the first things that comes to my mind is, right, so my path was, I was an assistant coach at New Canaan High School for 6 years. So I was in the FCAC, and just kind of seeing the way, as an assistant coach, I thought about lacrosse and the program. And like, at that point for me, like, the winning was the priority, the development was the priority. Like, that was number one, first and foremost, was like, as the assistant coach and running the defense, how do I make our team the best it can be? And sometimes in that situation, I felt like looking back on it, like, lost sight of all the other pieces, right? So thinking about now as a head coach, how much the relationships matter, right? And how much the off the field stuff matters. And, our walk up to practice is a 10, 15 minute walk up behind Bedford to get up to practice and back. And, some of those moments are the best moments for us, is where, our coaching staff walking up to practice and back from practice and just getting to talk to the kids about anything. And so I think, maybe not, a surprise or something I didn't realize would matter so much to me, right? As going from assistant to head coach, where so much of the focus was on win, 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 win. So much of that has shifted into like building that relationship with your player, right? And understanding who your player is as a person and what they do off the field and what they're interested in off the field. And that time you spend to build that relationship and get to know them and get to know who they are, and what they're going through, what they're dealing with, all those things, how much that matters, right? And so that was gained perspective, right? Becoming a head coach and shifting my role from assistant to head. I would think that maybe that's something that kind of stands out to me, is all of that stuff matters, and it actually leads to a lot of the success on the field and a lot of that win, win, win. But just how impactful it is.
It's amazing. Can't wait for the get season started. We're recording this on Tuesday. I think by this time, maybe what's the opening day?
Opening day is next Thursday.
We're about a little bit over a week, couple of days more than a week. It's going to be so much fun to be there, Coach. Thanks so much for your time today. I want to wish you the best of luck in the season. We'll be there, and let's go Wreckers.
I appreciate it. Thank you.